The massive viewing windows of New Geneva Station stretched across the restaurant's entire wall, revealing the breathtaking sight of three moons dancing round the distant planet below. Ships of every size glided through the starlit void like metal fish in an endless ocean. The stellar Crown restaurant sat at the very top of the station's luxury sector, where only the galaxy's wealthiest could afford to dine among the stars. Kang Minho tapped his fingers impatiently on the polished marble table, his expensive suit perfectly tailored to his lean frame. The holographic display floating before him showed profit margins that would make entire planetary governments jealous. His company, Apex Industries, had become the largest mining operation in human space, specializing in what the galaxy believed were priceless alien artifacts. Another successful quarter, he murmured to himself, scrolling through reports of excavation sites across the Kepler system. The numbers were staggering. Each artifact his teams recovered sold for millions of credits to museums, private collectors, and research institutions throughout the galaxy. The story was always the same. Ancient remnants of the mysterious Zephyrian civilization, race, that had vanished from the universe centuries ago, leaving behind only scattered technological marvels. The soft hum of the restaurant's atmospheric processors mixed with gentle classical music from old Earth, creating an ambience of refined luxury. Crystal chandeliers cast rainbow patterns across the ceiling, while the subtle scent of rare flowers from a dozen different worlds filled the air. This was Minho's world, a place where power and wealth commanded respect, where his word could influence entire star systems. "Your wine, sir," came a soft voice beside him. Minho barely glanced up from his reports, expecting to see one of the restaurant's usual servers instead. He found himself looking at a young man who seemed different from the typical staff. There was something genuine in his eyes, a quality that had become rare in Minho's world of corporate dealings and artificial pleasantries. The server's name tag read Park Ji-woo in elegant script. He couldn't have been more than 25, with careful, practiced movements that spoke of someone who took pride in his work. His uniform was impeccable, pressed to perfection, but there was a slight nervousness in his posture that suggested he was relatively new to serving the station's elite clientele. "Chateau Margaux, 2387, Ji-woo said, presenting the bottle with rehearsed professionalism from the vineyards of New Bordeaux. Minho nodded absently, his attention still divided between the wine and his holographic display. The vintage was one of his favorites, a wine that cost more than most people earned. In a year, he watched as Ji-woo carefully poured the deep red liquid into the crystal glass. The young man's hands steady despite his obvious nervousness as Ji-woo set the glass down on the table. His eyes inadvertently fell upon Minho's hand. The billionaire wore several expensive accessories, a watch that could buy a small starship, cufflinks made from rare Andromedan silver, and a communication device that connected him directly to his corporate empire. But it was the ring that caught Ji-woo's attention completely. The ring was unlike anything most people had ever seen. Crafted from what appeared to be an unknown metal that seemed to shift colors in the light. It held at its center a crystal that pulsed with an otherworldly blue glow. The crystal wasn't just beautiful. It seemed alive, its light ebbing and flowing like a heartbeat made of pure energy. Tiny symbols were etched around the band, symbols that no human linguist had ever been able to decode. Minho had worn this ring for over a decade, ever since his company's first major archaeological discovery in the Kepler system. It had been found in what appeared to be the remains of an ancient Zephyrian temple, buried beneath layers of crystal formations on a dead world. The ring had made him famous in archaeological circles and had become the symbol of his company's expertise in alien artifact recovery. Ji-woo single quotes as professional composure faltered for just a moment. His eyes widened slightly, and he leaned forward unconsciously, As if drawn by some invisible force, the crystal's pulsing light seemed to reflect in his pupils, creating an almost hypnotic effect. "Excuse me, sir," Jiwoo said, his voice barely. Above a whisper, the words seemed to escape him before he could stop them. "That ring. My mother has one exactly like it." The effect was immediate and devastating. Minho's hand, which had been reaching for the wine glass, froze in midair. The color drained from his face as if someone had opened an airlock and sucked all the life from him. His eyes, which had been confident and commanding moments before, now showed something that hadn't been there in years: genuine fear. The wine glass slipped from his suddenly nerveless fingers, tumbling through the air, in what seemed like slow motion. When it struck the marble table, it shattered with a sound like breaking stars, sending fragments of crystal and drops of precious wine across the white surface. The deep red liquid spread like blood across the pristine marble, staining everything it touched. "What did you say?" Minho whispered, his voice so quiet it was almost lost beneath the ambient sounds of the restaurant. Jiwoo immediately stepped back, his professional training warring with his natural concern. He had never seen a customer react so dramatically to such an innocent comment. The young man's face showed confusion and worry, completely unaware that his simple observation had just shattered a billionaire's entire worldview. "I am sorry, sir," Jiwoo stammered, pulling out a clean cloth to deal with the spilled wine. "I didn't mean to startle you. I just meant the ring looks familiar. My mother has something very similar. The same blue crystal, the same strange metal. She's had it for as long as I can remember." "That's impossible," Minho breathed, his voice gaining strength but losing all its previous confidence. He stared at the young waiter with wide eyes, as if seeing him for the first time. "This ring is unique, the only surviving artifact from the extinct Zephyrian race. My company spent 3 years excavating it from the ruins of their home world." But even as he spoke the words, doubt crept into his voice like poison. The ring had been the cornerstone of his entire empire, the proof of his company's legitimacy. In the field of xenoarchaeology, if this simple waiter's mother truly possessed an identical ring, then everything he had built, everything he believed about his fortune and his place in the galaxy, was about to crumble like sand castles before. At Tsunami, the restaurant continued to bustle around them, other diners unaware of the momentous conversation taking place at table 7. But for Minho, the entire universe had suddenly become very small, focused entirely on the young man standing before him and the impossible words that had just escaped his lips. The journey from New Geneva Station to Earth's surface took exactly 2 hours and 47 minutes, but for Minho, it felt like a lifetime. His private shuttle, normally a symbol of his success and power, now felt like a prison carrying him toward a truth he wasn't sure he wanted to discover. The sleek vessel cut through the atmosphere of humanity's homeworld, its advanced engines humming quietly as they descended toward the sprawling metropolis below. Earth had changed dramatically over the centuries. The planet that had once been humanity's only home was now a massive industrial hub, its surface covered with towering factories, mining operations, and residential sectors that stretched from horizon to horizon. The wealthy lived in the upper atmospheric cities, floating palaces that never touched the ground, while the working class inhabited the lower sectors where the air was thick with industrial fumes and the sky was barely visible through the smog dot sector. 7 was one of the oldest industrial districts, a maze of cramped apartment blocks and narrow streets where families had lived for generations. As Minho's shuttle touched down on the designated landing pad, he felt completely out of place. His expensive suit and polished shoes marked him as an outsider in this world of coveralls and work boots. The air itself tasted different here, metallic and harsh, filled with the scent of machinery and human sweat. Jiwoo had insisted on accompanying him. Though the young man seemed nervous about bringing such a powerful figure into his family's humble home, they walked through streets lined with vendors selling everything from alien food to recycled starship parts. Children played in the shadows of massive industrial complexes, their laughter echoing off the metal walls that surrounded them like a canyon of steel and concrete. "This is where I grew up," Jiwoo said quietly as they approached a weathered apartment building. "My mother's lived here for over 50 years. She refuses to move. Even though I could afford something better now." The building was ancient by galactic standards, its walls scarred by decades of acid rain and industrial pollution, but it was clean and well-maintained, with small gardens growing in improvised planters and colorful banners hanging from the windows. This was a community that took care of itself, where neighbors knew each other's names and shared whatever they had. They climbed 3 flights of stairs, passing families cooking dinner and children doing homework at kitchen tables. The sounds of life filled the narrow hallways, babies crying, couples arguing, televisions broadcasting news from across the galaxy. It was a world completely removed from the sterile luxury of Minho's usual environment. When they reached apartment 3C, Jiwoo knocked gently on the door. "Mom, I'm home. I brought the gentleman I told you about." The door opened to reveal a woman in her 70s, her silver hair pulled back in a simple bun and her clothes practical but neat. Kim Seon had the kind of face that spoke of a lifetime of hard work and quiet dignity. Her eyes were sharp and intelligent, and when she looked at Minho, he felt as though she could see right through all his wealth and power to the confused man beneath. "So you're the one who's been buying up all those old trinkets," she said with a slight smile. "Jiwoo told me you think they're from some alien world." The apartment was small but comfortable, filled with the accumulated treasures of a long life. Photographs covered every available surface: family gatherings, graduations, weddings, and celebrations spanning decades. The furniture was old but well cared for, and the walls were decorated with handmade artwork and mementos from throughout the galaxy. "Please, sit down," Seon said, gesturing to a worn but comfortable couch. "I'll make some tea. Real tea. Not that synthetic stuff they serve in the fancy places." As she moved about the small kitchen, Minho found himself studying the photographs more closely. Many showed people in work clothes, standing beside massive machines or posing in front of starships. These were the faces of working people, the ones who built the ships and mined the asteroids and kept the galaxy running, while people like him counted profits from their penthouse offices. "You wanted to see my ring, young man?" Seon asked, returning with a tray of tea and placing it on the small table between them. She disappeared into the bedroom for a moment, returning with a small wooden box that looked like it had been crafted by hand decades ago. The wood was dark and polished smooth by years of handling, and tiny flowers had been carved into its surface with loving care. "This belonged to my grandmother," she said, settling into her favorite chair. "She gave it to me when I was just a girl, told me to keep it safe for future generations." When she opened the box, Minho's world tilted on its axis. Inside, nestled in faded velvet, were not 1 but 3 rings, each identical to the one he wore. The same mysterious metal that seemed to shift colors in the light, the same pulsing blue crystals that hummed with otherworldly energy, the same intricate symbols carved round the bands. "My grandmother left these to me," Seon explained, her voice soft with memory. "She worked as a cleaner at the old research station Alpha back in 2157. Minimum wage job, but it was honest work. She used to tell me stories about the things she'd find in the waste disposal units: broken equipment, discarded experiments, things that the scientists thought were failures. Minho's hands trembled as he reached for one of the rings. The moment his fingers touched the metal, he felt the same energy signature that had made his own ring so valuable. The crystal pulsed with the same rhythm, the same frequency that had convinced the galaxy's leading scientists that these were artifacts of an advanced alien civilization. She found these 3 rings in the garbage, Soyeon continued, watching Minho's reaction with growing interest. Can you believe it? Someone was throwing them away like they were worthless junk. But my grandmother, she had an eye for beauty. She said they were too pretty to throw away. Too well made to be trash. The ring felt warm in Minho's palm. Its weight familiar yet somehow different. He had worn his ring for so long that it had become part of him, a symbol of his success and his company's expertise. Now, holding an identical copy, he felt like he was looking at himself in a funhouse mirror. She kept them for years, Soyeon said, her voice taking on a proud tone. When her daughters got married, she gave them each one as a wedding gift. Said every bride should have something beautiful to start her new life with. Jiwoo watched his mother with obvious affection, then noticed the stricken expression on Minho's face. The billionaire looked like he had been hit by a freight hauler. His usual confidence completely shattered. Sir, are you all right? Jiwoo asked, genuine concern in his voice. Minho looked up, his world spinning round him like a ship caught in a gravitational storm. These rings. They're supposed to be from an extinct alien civilization. I've built my entire empire on mining. They're artifacts. My company has made billions selling these to museums and collectors across the galaxy. The words felt hollow as he spoke them, the foundation of his entire life crumbling beneath the weight of this simple truth. Everything he had believed about his success, his expertise, his place in the galaxy, was built on a lie. Soyeon's expression darkened, the warmth in her eyes replaced by something much more serious. Alien, young man, these rings were made by humans. My sister's husband crafted them in the colony workshops before. She trailed off, old pain flickering across her weathered features like shadows from a long-ago fire. Before what? Minho pressed, though part of him already feared the answer. Song was quiet for a long moment, her fingers tracing the edge of the wooden box. When she spoke again, her voice was barely above a whisper. Before Kepler-442b was destroyed, the return journey to Minho's orbital headquarters felt like traveling through a nightmare. His massive space station, Apex Prime, hung in the void like a gleaming monument to corporate power. The structure stretched over 10 kilometers in length, its sleek hull bristling with communication rays, docking bays, and defensive systems. Thousands of employees worked within its corridors, all believing they were part of humanity's greatest archaeological enterprise. As his shuttle approached the main docking bay, Minho could see the constant stream of cargo vessels arriving and departing. Each ship carried what the galaxy believed were priceless alien artifacts, mysterious objects that museums, universities, and private collectors paid astronomical sums to acquire. The irony wasn't lost on him now. His entire empire was built on selling humanity's own lost treasures back to itself. The executive elevator whisked them silently through the station's central core, past laboratories where scientists studied alien technology and storage bays filled with mysterious artifacts. The journey to his private office on the command deck took only minutes, but Minho felt like he was ascending through layers of lies, each floor representing another level of deception. His office was a masterpiece of corporate luxury, its floor-to-ceiling windows offering a breathtaking view of the starfield beyond. The room was dominated by a massive holographic display system that could project three-dimensional images large enough to walk through. Rare artifacts from across the galaxy decorated the walls, each one supposedly representing a different extinct alien civilization. Jiwoo stood near the window, still clutching his mother's ring. his eyes wide as he took in the scale of Minho's operation. The young man had never seen anything like this, a private empire floating in space, commanding resources that entire planetary governments would envy. Li Hyunwoo, Minho's head of security, stood at attention near the door. He was a former military officer whose cybernetic implants gave him enhanced reflexes and tactical awareness. His loyalty to Minho was absolute, but even he seemed troubled by the events of the past few hours. "Sir," Hyunwoo said quietly, "I've activated full security protocols. No one enters or leaves without your permission. The officer's main display activated automatically as they entered, showing the real-time status of Apex Industries' operations across the galaxy. Dozens of mining sites, archaeological expeditions, and research facilities were represented by glowing dots scattered across a three-dimensional map of known space. Each dot represented millions of credits in revenue, built on what Minho now suspected was a foundation of murder and lies. Dr. Choi Min arrived within minutes of their summons, her face pale with exhaustion. She was Minho's chief archaeologist, a brilliant woman who had dedicated her life to understanding alien civilizations. Her small frame was dwarfed by the massive office, but her intelligence and determination made her one of the most respected scientists in the galaxy. "Sir," she said, her voice shaking slightly, "I've completed the molecular analysis you requested. The results are disturbing." She approached the holographic display and activated her personal data pad, there in the center of the room, suddenly filled with a three-dimensional model of the ring's internal structure. Magnified thousands of times, the crystalline matrix glowed with soft blue light, its atomic structure clearly visible in perfect detail. "These rings, they're not alien at all," Mina said, her scientific training warring with the implications of her discovery. "The crystallization process is distinctly human. The energy signature, the molecular composition, even the manufacturing techniques, they all match technology developed by human colonies in the mid-22nd century." She manipulated the display, highlighting specific sections of the ring's structure. More specifically, they matched techniques that were developed by the Kepler-4 colony in 2155. The settlers there had created a revolutionary new method of crystal cultivation that allowed them to grow these energy-storing matrices. Minho felt the blood drain from his face. "That's impossible. The Kepler-4 colony was destroyed by the Zephyrian War. These rings were found in the ruins of their civilization, sir." Mina said quietly, "There was no Zephyrian War. There was no Zephyrian civilization at all." The silence in the room was deafening. Even the station's ambient noise seemed to fade away, leaving only the sound of their breathing and the distant hum of the life support systems. Minho slammed his fist on the desk, the impact echoing through the office like a gunshot. "Then where did the story about the Zephyrian race come from? Who created that lie?" Mina's hands trembled as she pulled up another file, this one from the deepest archives of the company's founding documents. "I've been digging through our historical records. Sir, the truth is disturbing. Your grandfather, Kang Do-yeon, was one of 5 corporate executives who made a decision that changed everything." The holographic display shifted, showing corporate documents from over a century ago, board meeting transcripts, financial reports, and classified military orders floated in the air like ghosts from the past. "They ordered the orbital bombardment of Kepler-4 Mina continued, her voice barely above a whisper. The room fell silent. Ji-woo's grip tightened on his mother's ring, the metal growing warm in his palm. The young man stared at the documents floating before him, trying to process the magnitude of what he was hearing. The colony had developed revolutionary mining techniques, Mina explained, her scientific objectivity barely masking horror. They could extract resources from asteroids and planetary cores with unprecedented efficiency. But they refused to share their technology with the major corporations. They wanted to remain independent, to build their own society free from corporate control. She activated another section of the display, showing star charts and military deployment records, so the corporations decided to eliminate the competition and claim the planet's resources for themselves. They hired mercenary fleets and launched a coordinated attack. The colony never had a chance, and the alien story, Minho asked, though he already knew the answer. The pieces were falling into place like a puzzle made of nightmares, a cover-up. Mina said, her voice thick with disgust. They planted false evidence at the bombardment sites, created fake archaeological reports, and invented an entire fictional alien race to explain the ruins. They made it look like they were mining artifacts from an extinct alien civilization instead of profiting from genocide. Hyunwoo stepped forward, his cybernetic implants glowing softly as he accessed his own data files. Sir, there's more. I found shipping manifests from 2157. Just after the bombardment, thousands of alien artifacts were actually personal belongings of the colonists. Wedding rings, family heirlooms, children's toys, religious symbols. Everything the settlers had owned was catalogued and sold as mysterious alien technology. The horror of it hit Minho like a physical blow. He stared at the ring on his finger, the same ring he had worn with pride for over a decade. It wasn't an ancient alien treasure at all. It was a wedding band from a murdered human colony, probably worn by someone who had died in the orbital bombardment his own grandfather had ordered. The energy signatures, the unknown metals, the undecipherable symbols, he said slowly, each word feeling like broken glass in his throat. It was all human technology. Advanced human technology that the corporation stole and then pretended to discover. Jiwoo looked up from his mother's ring, his eyes filled with a mixture of sadness and determination. My family, he said quietly. We're not just random people who happened to find these rings. We're survivors, aren't we? Descendants of the people who escaped the bombardment. The pieces of the puzzle continued to fall into place. The rings in his mother's possession weren't just similar to Minho's. They were identical because they had all been created by the same human colony, by the same craftsmen who had poured their hearts and souls into creating something beautiful for their loved ones. Minho sank into his chair, the weight of generations of lies crushing down upon him. His entire fortune, his company's reputation, his place in galactic society, all of it was built on the graves of innocent people who had simply wanted to live free from corporate control. The truth had a way of spreading like wildfire through the galaxy's underground networks. Within 72 hours of Minho's discovery, encrypted messages were bouncing between hidden communication relays, passed along by smugglers, dock workers, and anyone else who lived in the shadows of the corporate empire. The story was too explosive to contain. A century-old genocide covered up by fake alien artifacts, and now one of the perpetrator's own descendants was willing to expose it all. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Families who had hidden their true heritage for generations began reaching out through secret channels. People who had grown up believing they were orphans discovered they were actually descendants of the kept-to-be survivors. Wedding rings, family heirlooms, and personal items that had been dismissed as worthless trinkets were suddenly revealed as precious links to a murdered civilization. Titan Station orbited the gas giant in the Outer Rim, a massive mining facility that had been abandoned decades ago when more profitable sites were discovered. Its hollow corridors and empty chambers made it the perfect meeting place for those who needed to stay hidden from corporate surveillance. The station's old mining shafts stretched deep into the asteroid it was built upon, creating a maze of tunnels where even the most advanced scanning systems couldn't penetrate. Minho had never seen anything like the gathering that assembled in the station's main cargo bay. Over 200 people had made the dangerous journey from across the galaxy, each carrying their own piece of the hidden truth. They came from every walk of life, engineers and farmers, teachers and mechanics, artists and soldiers. What united them was the knowledge that their ancestors had died in the Kepler-4 massacre, and their families had been forced to hide their true heritage for generations. The cargo bay was dimly lit by emergency lighting, casting long shadows across. The assembled crowd, makeshift seating had been ranged in a rough circle, with Minho and Jiwoo at the center. The air was thick with tension and decades of suppressed anger. These people had grown up watching Apex Industries profit from their family's tragedy, selling their ancestors' belongings as alien artifacts while they struggled to survive in the galaxy's forgotten corners. Jiwoo stood beside Minho, his translator device working overtime as conversations flowed between Standard Galactic and the various dialects that had developed among the scattered survivor communities. Some spoke the old colonial language that had been used on Kepler-4, while others mixed it with the local languages of the worlds where they had found refuge. "You want our forgiveness?" asked Jun Tae-young, a grizzled engineer who's cybernetic. Al marked him as a veteran of the Outer Rim mining wars. His grandparents had been among the last to escape the bombardment, carrying only what they could fit in a single cargo container. "Your family murdered our people and got rich selling our grandparents' belongings as alien trinkets." The accusation hung in the air like a physical weight. Minho felt every eye in the room focused on him, generations of pain and anger condensed into a single moment of judgment. He had expected this reaction, but experiencing it was far more intense than he had imagined. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," Minho replied, his voice steady despite the hostile atmosphere. "I'm asking for your help to expose the truth." The room erupted in angry voices. People shouted in multiple languages, their words mixing together in a cacophony of rage and disbelief. Some demanded immediate justice. Others questioned whether this was all an elaborate trap. A few suggested that Minho should be handed over to the authorities, though they all knew that the same corporations that had ordered the original massacre still controlled most of the galaxy's legal systems. "He's one of them," shouted a woman from the back of the crowd. "Why should we trust anything he says?" "Because he came to us," replied another voice. "He could have destroyed the evidence and continued living his comfortable life." Maybe this is all part of some bigger plan," suggested a man with scars across his face. "Maybe they want to eliminate all the survivors at once." The arguments continued for all minutes, voices rising and falling like waves against her. "Sure." Minho remained silent, understanding that these people needed to voice their anger and suspicion. He had lived his entire life in luxury, while they had struggled in the shadows, always looking over their shoulders, always afraid that their true heritage would be discovered. But then Soyeon stood up, her elderly frame somehow commanding attention despite her small stature. She had insisted on attending the meeting despite her age and the dangerous journey from Earth. The room gradually fell silent as people recognized her as the Keeper of the Rings, the woman whose family had preserved the truth for generations. "My husband died in the bombardment," she said quietly, her voice carrying clearly through the still air. "I was pregnant with Jiwoo's father, managed to escape on the last transport. I've spent 70 years watching your company profit from our tragedy." She walked slowly to the center of the circle, her ancient ring catching the dim light, the same ring that had started this entire revelation. The simple piece of jewelry that had brought down a century of lies. "But this young man came to my home," she continued, looking directly at Minho. "He didn't have to. He could have destroyed the evidence, silenced us. made us disappear like so many others have over the years instead. He chose truth. Her words carried the weight of decades of experience, of losses that could never be recovered and injustices that could never be fully repaid. But there was something else in her voice. A recognition that sometimes redemption came from unexpected places. The corporations won't let this stand, warned Han Jisu, a former corporate security officer who had discovered her own connection to the massacre only recently. Her knowledge of corporate tactics made her one of the most valuable members of the resistance movement. They'll come for all of us. They have private armies, mercenary fleets, and enough political influence to make entire star systems look the other way. She gestured to the assembled crowd. We're not soldiers or politicians. We're just ordinary people who happen to carry the blood of the dead. What can we possibly do against that kind of power? As if summoned by her words, alarms began blaring. Throughout the station, the emergency lighting shifted to red, bathing the cargo bay in an ominous glow. The assembled survivors looked round in confusion and growing fear as the warning signals echoed through the abandoned corridors. Hyunwoo's voice crackled through the communication system, his military training evident in his calm but urgent tone. Sir, we have a problem. Corporate security fleets are surrounding the station. I'm reading at least 50 warships, including several dreadnought-class vessels. They're not here to negotiate. The reality of their situation hit the room like a physical blow. They were trapped in an abandoned mining station with no way to escape. Surrounded by corporate forces that had orders to eliminate any threat to the century-old cover-up, the same corporations that had ordered the original massacre were now preparing to finish what they had started. Minho felt a strange sense of calm settle over him. For the first time in his life, he knew exactly what he had to do. He had spent decades building an empire based on lies, and now he had a chance to tear it all down in service of the truth. Then we make our stand here, he said, his voice carrying to every corner of the cargo bay. We broadcast the truth to every corner of the galaxy before they can silence us. The survivors looked at each other, fear and determination warring in their eyes. They had come here seeking justice, but they had found something even more valuable, the chance to ensure that their ancestors' story would finally be told. The first explosion shook Titan Station like a giant's fist pounding on its hull. Through the massive viewing ports of the command center, Minho could see the corporate fleet ranged in perfect military formation round the ancient mining facility. 50 warships hung in the void like mechanical vultures, their weapon systems glowing with deadly energy. At the center of the formation, 5 massive dreadnought-class vessels bore the corporate logos of the founding families. The same companies that had ordered the Kepler-Fulfer to be massacred over a century ago. They're not even trying to hide it anymore, muttered Han Jisu, her fingers flying across the tactical display. Her experience as a former corporate security officer was invaluable now, as she tried to coordinate their desperate defense. Those are military-grade plasma cannons and quantum torpedoes. They're planning to vaporize the entire station. The survivors had transformed the abandoned mining facility into an improvised fortress. Engineers rigged the old mining lasers to serve as defensive weapons, while former soldiers among the group organized patrol schedules and defensive positions. Teachers and farmers found themselves manning communication stations and medical posts, their peaceful lives suddenly thrust into the middle of a war they had never asked for. The station's corridors echoed with the sounds of preparation. Families who had lived in hiding for generations were now openly fighting for their right to exist. Children who had grown up hearing whispered stories about their ancestors were now loading ammunition and carrying supplies to the defenders. The elderly, who remembered fleeing the original massacre, served as advisors and strategists, their memories of corporate tactics proving invaluable. Minho stood at the center of it all. his expensive suit replaced by practical work clothes and a communication headset. For the first time in his life, he felt like he was truly part of something meaningful. The wealth and power that had once defined him meant nothing here. What mattered was his commitment to the truth and his willingness to fight for it. "Sir, they're hailing us," reported a young technician whose grandmother had been a Kepler-4 survivor. "It's coming from the lead dreadnought." The main screen flickered to life, revealing the face of Executive Director Park Kangmin, one of the most powerful men in the galaxy. His corporate uniform was perfectly pressed, his expression cold and calculating. Behind him, Minho could see the bridge of a state-of-the-art warship, its crew moving with military precision. Kangmin said, his voice carrying across the station's communication system. "You've made a serious mistake. Surrender now, and we might be willing to negotiate." "There's nothing to negotiate," Minho replied, his voice steady despite the overwhelming odds they faced. "The truth is already out there. Every major news network in the galaxy has received our evidence." Kangman's expression didn't change. "Evidence can be discredited. Networks can be bought or silenced. But you and your terrorist friends are about to become footnotes in history." The communication cut off, and immediately the corporate fleet opened fire. Plasma bolts and energy beams lanced through space, striking the station's outer hull with devastating force. The ancient structure groaned under the assault, its metal bones creaking and bending under the tremendous pressure. "Shields at 60%. Called out Yun Tae-young from the engineering station. The grizzled engineer had rigged the station's old mining equipment to provide some protection. But everyone knew it wouldn't last long against military-grade weapons. The battle quickly became a desperate struggle for survival. Corporate assault teams launched from the attacking ships, their sleek boarding pods punching through the station's hull like bullets through paper. The survivors fought back with everything they had: mining tools, improvised weapons, and the fierce determination of people who knew they were fighting for their very existence. Broadcasting on all frequencies, Taeyeon announced from the communications ray, his voice barely audible over the sound of explosions. "The evidence is going out live across the galaxy, on screens throughout human space." The truth was finally being revealed. Corporate documents showing the orders for the Kepler-4 to be bombardment, survivor testimonies describing the massacre, and molecular analysis proving that the alien artifacts were actually human-made items from the murdered colony. The revelation sent shockwaves through the galactic community, as people realized that one of humanity's greatest archaeological discoveries was actually built on genocide. The corporate forces fought desperately to cut the transmission. But the survivors had anticipated this. They had set up multiple broadcast points throughout the station, each one protected by improvised barriers and defended by people who had nothing left to lose. Every time the corporations destroyed one transmitter, another came online, continuing to beam the truth to every corner of known space. "They're breaking through the eastern docking bay," Hyunwoo reported, his security team falling back under heavy fire. The former military officer had organized the station's defenses as best he could, but they were vastly outnumbered and outgunned. "We can't hold them much longer." Minho looked round the command center, seeing the faces of people who had trusted him with their lives and their secrets. Jiwoo stood at a nearby console, helping to coordinate the broadcast while keeping watch for his elderly mother. Song had insisted on staying in the command center despite the danger, her presence serving as an inspiration to the other survivors. That's when Minho made his choice. He activated the station's emergency protocols and headed for the main reactor chamber. If he couldn't stop the corporations from silencing the truth, he would make sure their actions were heard across the galaxy. "Sir, what are you doing?" Jiwoo called out, following him through the corridors as explosions rocked the station around them, ensuring this story survives. Minho replied, his voice filled with a determination he had never felt before. The reactor's energy burst will amplify our transmission. Every human world will hear what really happened to Kepler for it to be. They raced through the station's maze of corridors. Dodging falling debris and corporate soldiers, the reactor chamber was located deep in the station's core, protected by layers of shielding and security systems. As they descended through the levels, the sounds of battle grew more distant, replaced by the steady hum of the station's power systems. But when they reached the reactor chamber, they found they weren't alone. Soyeon stood before the massive control console, her weathered hands working the controls with surprising skill and confidence. The elderly woman who had seemed so fragile in her apartment was now revealed as someone with deep technique, knowledge and unshakable resolve. I was a reactor engineer before the bombardment, she said with a sad smile, not looking up from her work. Worked on the Kepler 440 power station for 15 years before I met my husband. This is my story to tell. The reactor began to build toward overload, its energy output climbing toward dangerous levels. The plan was simple but effective. When the reactor reached critical mass, its explosion would create an electromagnetic pulse that would amplify their transmission across multiple star systems. The corporate fleet would be forced to retreat or risk being caught in the blast, and the truth would be broadcast with such power that no force in the galaxy could stop it. You don't have to do this, Jiwoo said to his mother, tears streaming down his face. There has to be another way. Song turned to look at her son, her eyes filled with love and pride. I've lived with this secret for 70 years, watching them profit from our pain. This is my chance to make it right. The transmission went out just as corporate forces breached the command center. The reactor's energy surge sent the truth screaming across the galaxy at the speed of light, carrying with it the testimonies of the survivors, the evidence of the massacre, and the proof that humanity's greatest archaeological discovery was actually built on the bones of a murdered colony. The corporate fleet was forced to retreat as the station's destruction sent shockwaves through the surrounding space. But it was too late. The truth had spread beyond their ability to contain it, carried by quantum communication networks to every inhabited world in known space as the light faded from Titan's station. The last thing visible was the figure of an elderly woman, her ancient ring catching the dying light as she stood proudly among the ruins of a century-old lie. The truth was finally free, the D.